Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We're looking at the extraordinary matter of esoteric psychology, a psychology that takes into account almost the total environmental situation of mankind. By that we don't mean just where we are living and how we were brought up in this particular town or area, and what school we went to, and what marketplaces we associated with, and so on. But we're taking into account very esoteric matters, the existence of the immortal part of you, that part of you that was there always, during previous lives. It was there. It has arranged, if you like, if I may use such a word, your incarnations. It has decided what challenges should be best presented to you in order to give the higher self its ability to evolve even further along its path towards your destiny and towards immortality. So we take that into account in our esoteric psychology. We also take into account the karma that has been earned by the various incarnations. And by karma we mean long-standing karma, karma that may go back many, many lives, in which you have sown the seeds of goodness or difficulty or evil, and must settle these imbalances in lives to come. That karma may be very short-term. It may be a karma that is related to violence in the last life. It may even be a karma that is related to this life, events in this life. We take these matters into account. We take into account the soul's purpose of the particular individual. And in addition to that, we take into account the hereditary equipment that you were born with, that you inherited from generations and generations which made up your family. We also take into account the fact, as I mentioned earlier, the common environmental situations that you have grown up in. And in order to do this, in order to be able to put together a synthesis, a bringing together of everything that we know about mankind and applying it to you or to the subject of the psychological analysis, we resort to an age-old key. I would never have been able to reach my degree of development, whatever it is, without using keys. The key which we call esoteric astrology is very, very important, and the best perfected key that I know to unlock the mysteries of life and what we call esoteric science. But there is this one as well, the key of esoteric psychology. And we also add to that the psychology of the seven rays. What we mean by the seven rays is that our solar system, in which the central feature is our logos, the sun, the Lord of the sun, has, as it were, permeating the whole of our solar system. And by that I mean the various planets that make up our solar system and the life forms that exist on those planets. Whether those life forms are merely in the mineral structure of that planet or advancing into the plant life and even into animal life, and even in the case of our own planet up to the human stage. We take into account this great logos's permeating influence. Now you and I are characterized by chromosomes. There are 23 pairs of chromosomes that dictate the color of your eyes, that dictate the size of your hands, the quality of your voice, and so on. These characteristics we call hereditary. We say here that this Logos of ours, this solar Logos, this grand man of the heavens, as we often term him, has got his own, as it were, crudely chromosomal content. And he is related to 7 characteristics. 7 characteristics rule the whole of our solar system, rule the lives that exist in those different kingdoms that I have just enumerated, the lives that make up the mineral kingdom with their glorious gemstones, which we can use to our advantage if we know what our ray complement is, the various vegetable and plant lives, right up to the flowering parts of that kingdom, which we call the plant kingdom, the lives of the animal kingdom, the lives of the human, and even, in some instances at least, the lives of the kingdom that follows man, follows humanity, which we call the Deva kingdom, the kingdom of angels. We're all in the process of becoming angelic, a human angelic type, as it were. So we say that there are 7 chromosomes or rays governing everything that exists in our particular solar system. Here is the solar system with its planets and circuit around the central grand man of the heavens, we call him the sun. And these rays permeate the sun and all life that exists in it. We say then that these 7 rays have their characteristics, and tonight we're considering one of these rays. Half of you at least will have something of this first ray of will and power incorporated into your makeup, whether it is in the physical body, which I have outlined here, and of course its etheric counterpart, the interpenetrating etheric force field, which is also physical. It has its ray. It has its ray. I happen to have, perfusing my physical body, and you would soon learn the characteristics of it, I have a 3rd ray physical body. I have a 3rd ray physical body. And it is fairly easy to assess the rays of the different physical bodies that you meet around you. The importance here being, of course, that not only have you got a ray physical body, but the brain is also ruled by the ray of the physical body. And you may have a 3rd ray brain which is able to handle many different problems at once, deal with many various projects at once. Or you may have a 7th ray brain that can only manage one project well at once and cannot deal with the others until later. And so there are many characteristics related to the human brain. So that's the physical body. But you know, and I know, that we have an emotional nature, and we call it the astral body. The astral body is a loose-fitting structure which enables us to draw emotional energy from the astral world to deal with it in the neighbor, in the region of the solar plexus chakra, and thereby to derive from it the energies of drive that drive our personalities. Now we say that not only is the physico-etheric on its ray, but the astral body is on one of these rays. If it is on the 6th ray, then most of you have got a 6th ray astral body, and it has its characteristics. It is the most frequent of the bodies. Or it may be on any of the others. You also know, of course, that we have got a mental body as well, half-formed, granted, only half-formed, and it may also have one of these 7 rays ruling the mental body. Now these various vehicles combined together, we bracket them together, and we say that these vehicles together make up the personality of man. The personality of man. We say that there is a physical body, which we've just talked about, which has got its ray. We say there is an astral body that has got its ray. We say there is a mental body which has got its ray, and the combination of these can give a ray of personality. We say the personality is the province of expression for the human soul. Now notice how very quickly and effectively we have been able to sum up the esoteric nature of man. He has an immortal part of him, which we call the soul, and it has got a ray, one of those up there somewhere. There is the different bodies that I have described, and they together have a personality, and the soul lives within the personality in an incarnation. Together, these structures, as you well know, make up the human aura, and we have a completer picture of man's nature than what I certainly learnt at university about psychology, orthodox psychology. And so we're looking at one of these rays. It is the first ray. It's shown in its natural color, red. Now don't tear each other's jugular veins out over the colors allocated to the rays. Many things affect the nature of the rays that you are motivated by. And if you are a non-scientific person at all, it is very, very difficult for the 5th ray to express itself in you. And on the chart nearby, you will see that the 5th ray is the ray of concrete knowledge and analytical science. And many people have great difficulty in life being specific, being pointed, being direct in their behavior. And these people are usually short of the 5th ray of concrete knowledge and analytical science, which demands facts. I had a 5th ray mind for many years, and it helped me get through my medical degree, and it was a great help to me. And I had to train myself to look at facts. Later in my life, long after my medical exams, I was able to relax again and allow my 4th ray mind to return, the ray of art and harmony through conflict. And that was a great consolation to me, to be able to indulge myself in expressing the 4th ray mind, my 4th ray mind, on the ray of art and harmony through conflict. So we're dealing with the 1st ray, and don't try and achieve too much here tonight. Rather, go into it with me and understand the nature of the 1st ray. This is the ray that we say can become very focused. It can become very one-pointed, a very focused ray. Other rays are different. The 2nd ray is the ray of love wisdom, and it is a beautifully diffused energy that comes from 2nd ray qualities. Whether it is your 2nd ray soul, whether it is your 2nd ray astral body, the 2nd ray gives a diffused, loving, embracing quality. Wisdom lovingly applied, love wisely applied. But we're not talking about the 2nd ray, though the 1st ray loves to go linked together with the 2nd ray. We're talking about the ray of will and power. And therefore, we talk about a trinity. We talk about what we Christians might say, Father, Son, and Holy Ghost. Well, that's a language that we all understand very well. But the Father implies power, and therefore is the first ray quality of the Trinity, the first ray quality of the Holy Trinity. The Son represents the love wisdom, or second ray, and the Holy Ghost represents the third ray. And so the Trinity exists in religions, and here's an example of one of them, but it also exists in biology. And if we look at the cell of biology, it has a nucleus, it has a cytoplasm, and it has a cell membrane enclosing it. We say here again, the nucleus, where the power of the cell exists, where the information of the cell exists, where the capacity of the cell to construct itself out of coding exists, the DNA molecule, in fact, we say that is first ray. We say that the contents of the cytoplasm, where various activities are expressed, is on the second ray of love wisdom, and the cytoplasm on the third. And so we talk about a multiplicity of the Trinity, Father, Son, and Holy Ghost. If we go into the Hindu terminology, then we talk about the three gods, Shiva, Vishnu, and Brahma. And we're talking about the same thing. And the reason I mention that is so that you understand that the rays apply universally to everybody on our planet, and they can be used in that respect, universal application. One of the great characteristics of the Trinity is the fact that the Trinity can express itself as the creator in life, as the maintainer of what is created, and as the destroyer. Termination of what has been created, a form of some sort, and we talk about, therefore, a Trinity there. The creator, the maintainer, and the destroyer. And we can use these factors very, very easily. Let us consider them in action. Going from the ordinary cell, we can say that at conception, the bringing in of the sperm to fertilize the ovum produces the beginning, the creator, in you, in me, in any other human. There is the creator quality manifesting there. As the cell divides and divides and divides again, it begins to produce the embryo, which is maintained very carefully by its cord, and this is the maintainer factor operating, and then of course you have the life, the birth, and so on, and then finally death. And so we say that there is a creator quality about the first ray. They can start things. They are entrepreneurs. They have initiative, the ability to begin things. Not only to begin a thing, but to maintain it. It is said that there are Buddhas galore awaiting incarnation. There are very, very highly developed souls, souls that you and I have never come in touch with. They are waiting incarnation, waiting conditions here. And it's all very well for them to incarnate. The ability to incarnate means that there must be a thrust, and there must not only be the thrust, but the maintenance. And the great difficulty today is, amongst our huge population, the great difficulty today is not to start something. Everyone gets a pet idea. Everybody gets an imaginative conception, a creative, imaginative conception going. But you have to give what you have created, that idea, that concept, you have to give it momentum, you have to give it sustenance, you have to maintain it. And it's all very well having the thrust, but are you able to maintain what you have created? And then perhaps the hardest thing of all is to be able to take the form that you have created, whether it is a business, and you may set up the horoscope of the business you're going to start quite easily, and therefore give it a beginning. It is not just the creation of something and the maintenance of it, but then the hardest thing of all, to decide that what you had done, what you had set up and done, now must be terminated. We can't carry all our projects through life without destroying those we no longer need. Many of us cling on to old habits that we created very carefully, old attitudes, prejudices, and the whole process of spiritual unfoldment is one of psychosynthesis, where we have to weed out and destroy so many things that we have created in our lives. Otherwise, we never grow wise, we never grow mature, we never grow older, as it were. And so this aspect of the first ray is very important indeed. The creator, the maintainer, and the destroyer in life. Let us look at some of the first ray qualities in mankind. You're looking at the first ray in the animal kingdom, you're looking at the horse. The horse that has the capacity to maintain a speed, great impetus, is able to subject its will to the rider, and we say that the horse is on the first ray of will and power, whereas the doggy is on the sixth ray of devotion and idealism. It is devoted to its master or mistress, primarily over everything else, eventually. And then you can hazard for yourselves what the cat comes under. Probably the fourth ray of art and harmony through conflict. And the monkey, perhaps under the third ray of active intelligence, switching from one thing to another constantly, a flittering mind, as it were. Now we're looking at the first ray manifesting itself in human nature. These individuals have the capacity, and you would say, of course, is this a strong first ray manifesting? Is it an averagely expressive first ray, or is it a very weak one? And where there are weak first ray types, they can exist anywhere. They can exist in childhood and grow out of it. They can exist in adolescence and become a damn pest and be cured of it. The first ray can manifest at any stage in life. But the first ray generally has the ability to persist against all odds. To persist against all odds. They don't have to be encouraged to persist. In fact, you may have to try and discourage them from their persistence. They are, in fact, capable of this physically, to endure, to persist. Mentally, they have the capacity to manage a situation that requires persistence, and also emotional capacity for it. They have tremendous tenacity of purpose, the first ray at its best. They can get the idea of having the soul's purpose and fusing them, and they can take that idea and drive it and drive it and drive it, no matter what criticism is presented to them, until you almost tear your hair out at them because of this damn persistence of them. So by now you're getting a picture of the first ray type. Usually, if it's a spiritual person, the first ray develops a certainty about his destiny. I don't know what my destiny is. Very few people do. I don't know what my destiny is, but I know it's not here. I know it is to do with serving mankind. I know it is to do with something to do with the arts. My destiny, I can feel it in my bones. And also there comes with it, after the search for your destiny, there comes the certainty of immortality. And that is a characteristic in the behavior, the personality, if you like, of first-rate people. They're able to work alone. They're able to work alone. You give a first-rate person a job to do, they'll get on with it. They may be able to get help or they may not. You don't have to worry about that. You've given them a job to do. And they will persist with it even if they have to do it on their own. To be able to work alone, unsupported. When things go wrong, we usually liken this to the mountainside, where the whole of the mountain is tumbling down around you and you're holding on to the mountainside, the rocks and even the weeds to hold your place there. That is first ray, the ability to hold their place alone, often unsupported. With this, they have also the ability, and this is why they're so useful in a group, they have the ability to act as first reserve. Something goes wrong, they can push themselves in and assist for a short while anyway, where there is this gap. And they love to do it. They stick their necks out. They stick their necks out, and sometimes they get battered around a bit, but that's their nature. Whereas second-rate types are backroom girls. They're the backroom girls. They quietly make the tea and the coffee, and after somebody has seen Dr. Baker and is in pieces, they take that person and give him a cup of tea and calm him down and cement him with love wisdom back into the group. That's love wisdom, second ray, as compared to the first ray. They're wonderful at acting as first reserve, and all groups have got to have first reserves in them. Otherwise the group breaks up. And what do you call it? Self-destructs? Yes. They have this incredible ability to make decisions unaided. They can come into a situation of absolute chaos. Nobody knows what the score is. People are running around bewildered. Things are going wrong right and left. And a first ray can come in and sum the situation up immediately and know what the next thing to do should be. And that is something that is given by grace of the first ray of will and power. And so they generally are very fair people. They make mistakes, terrible mistakes, but they are generally very fair people if they are good first rays. They're able, by some extraordinary way, to be able to encourage the weak. They can talk to the weak and give them new courage, pull them out of a depression, give them a new kickstart, as it were, to get going again. And they also have this ability to temper the strong who are getting out of hand in a group. Now let's look at their vices. Let's look at some of their vices. Their pride knows no bounds. They have an immense pride, and you mustn't prick the bubble of pride that they have, because they'll never forgive you for it. The great symbol of the first ray, in fact, there are several symbols of the first ray, and perhaps the most important one is the finger of God. You will do what you are told. And the first ray rules the forefinger, and the sign of Aries rules the forefinger. The other fingers come under Gemini, but not the first one. And it is the symbol of power. It is admonition. It is talking about infinity, immortality. I don't care. I promise you, with all the capacities that I have, that you will live forever. And so the forefinger is very good symbol. You see it, of course, on the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel, where God's forefinger is pointing down towards Adam, and Adam's forefinger is just coming up to touch, nearly touching that of God's. It is also symbolized by forward motion. Anything that keeps going forward is a symbol of the first ray. A terrible symbol of the first ray was what we called the Russian steamroller in the First World War. The Russian steamroller was 6 million men moving westward, crossing Germany and all the states in its way, and nothing could stop it. In fact, it finally ground to a halt, and the Russians lost the war in that respect anyway. Let's consider some of the qualities here. The peacock, symbol of proudness and ostentation. And it's good, you see, you can't run away from these people. You're going to meet them. Whether they have a first-rate mind, which is highly critical, whether they have a first-rate emotional nature, which gives them very specific emotions that you never dare touch, or whether they have a first-rate physical body and brain, where they are all skin and nervous system and react accordingly. Whatever part is involved, they are very, very extraordinary people indeed. Their pride knows no bound. Lovely saying, better to reign in hell than serve in heaven. They often are prepared to take the worst of two kinds rather than submit to somebody or submit to a regime. You meet them every day of your life, whether it's in business or outside of business. I have one in my life that is just similarly placed, will not submit, and therefore is prepared to live a life of hell, reigning in hell, rather than submit and be a servant of the divine than the other. They have a willfulness that knows no reason. You'll do as you're damn well told is a famous factor in the life of the first ray. They are very emphatic indeed. And of course, they can't take criticism. They can't take criticism. You criticize them, they will know that they're expected to forgive you. No way. No way. What the first ray does is just turn aside from you, and you are out of the first ray life. They cut you off. I have nothing more to do with that person. He has said what he thinks of me, or what my work is, what about my work. I'll have nothing more, and they walk away from you if you criticize them. They do it even as fathers to their children. If the child is naughty, persistently naughty, the father will say, "Get away from me, I don't want you." Punishment. And they'll cut the child off for some considerable time because it's part of their nature. The child has criticized him or done something which is even worse that he doesn't like, and he cuts the child off. And that is the tendency of this. They have a tremendous anger which, once aroused, knows no placating. We call it bombast. And first ray bombast comes under the planet rather of Pluto. Pluto bombast. An anger when aroused that has no placating. An arrogance that cannot be bridled. an obstinacy that survives all persuasion and all punishment. They very frequently take on more than they should, but they'll never come for help. No, they won't come for help. They may order you to help them, but they will never appeal to you to come and help them. Their pride tells them, no, I took this on, I'm going to finish this damn job myself. I'm not going to have anybody else messing it around, as it were. They love brinkmanship. They don't do well unless they are tottering on a brink. And either you do it and do it and do it, or you're over the brink. And that is a very spurring thing to them. I once worked with George Delaware in the Delaware laboratories at Oxford, and he was always surrounded with criticism, the tormenting of science. And he stuck to his guns and had to put up with murder. But the way that he dealt with it was to make everything brinkmanship. Even if it's somebody coming for lunch, we've got to get what he wants, and we can't have lunch unless we get that dish for him to have lunch. He's a famous scientist, and everything is it going to work or isn't it going to work? So that's something of the character of the first ray. The first ray is the destroyer, and it can work in strange ways to do that destroying. Hitler was very powerfully first ray. Not only could he destroy, but he could create. He took Germany by the scruff of the neck. When they had inflation, you had to take a wheelbarrow to wheel your money and to pay for a loaf of bread, a wheelbarrow full of notes. Terrible inflation, terrible situation there. He was able to take the country and get it on its feet and maintain it through a tremendously prolonged war. The war never seemed to end. And he had destructive powers with it. It was he that really cleared the East End of its slums, wasn't it? The bombs came down and just destroyed most of the East End. And with it went the slums. And the slums might be there to this day if they had not been destroyed by this madman. Madman in inverted commas, a very extraordinary person. Yes, other very famous first-rate types, Blavatsky. Anybody who has been into the life of Blavatsky, just like George Delaware, surrounded with tormentors, having this precious secret that the masters were trying to give out. And she was the only one on the planet that could do it, at that time anyway. And they had to use her. And somehow or the other, she got through that work for them and gave us the wonderful book, The Secret Doctrine. And then there was Churchill, another very fine example of all these qualities that I have described. Resoluteness, determination. We will fight them on the beaches. We will fight them in the air. Anything, anywhere. And he would go. These wonderful wartime speeches. Thatcher, to a certain extent, she had great first-rate qualities. She had a first-rate personality, and she used it. Not always effectively, but she used it. The best first-rate personality that I know amongst women in England is Barbara Cartland, who has an extraordinary power in her personality. I've seen her on television with a new remedy, a natural remedy of some sort. And they brought it, and she said, she would say, oh yes, that's the remedy of choice. It will, my dears, it will tend to your skin, it will make your periods regular, it will do this, do that, etc., etc. And then they'd switch to the doctors, and what is your opinion of the remedy? Well, there is no proof of it, there's no evidence, and Cartland would say, oh, rubbish, and she would dismiss them just like that. Yes, a lot of faults, but a very powerful first-rate personality. I know her very well indeed. She's a neighbor of yours, isn't she? Doesn't live very far from here. Then you have Saddam Hussein, who somebody let him down. We don't know that part of the story yet. I believe that he thought that he could get, once he attacked the Jews, he could get the whole Arab world to throw their lot in with them. Well, in earlier days, we had Mussolini, who proclaimed guns before butter. If we need guns and we haven't got the wealth to produce guns, then we'll do without butter on our tables. And he damn well meant what he said and did it. Another example of dictatorship. Dictatorship comes under the first ray of will and power. Dictatorship and fascism, and of course Nazism, they come under, but democracy comes under love wisdom. The second ray of love wisdom for democracy. The third ray is the ray of comparative religion. Many people like to do that. They like to pick up a religion and look at it and examine it and judge something of it, then another one and another and another. And somehow or the other, by looking at the various religions and comparing them, come to their own philosophical conclusion. And that's typically third ray. The many, spread-eagled around, ability to deal with them all at once and look at them objectively, that's third ray. Second ray is, well, we've dealt with that. And so we can say that in politics, the rays also work, they also function. The home of the first ray on the planet is said to be Shambhala. Shambhala. Symbolically, it is said to be an island in the middle of a sea in the Gobi Desert. Well, there were certainly great expanses of lakes there in ancient days. But today, the will of God is expressed through whoever to that incredible being represents his will best in the world. And we call that person, places, the group involved, we call it Shambhala. And that's a very useful expression. You know that will does best of all when it is focused to a point. And when the will of God is concerned, we say that it is focused to a point in a place called Shambhala. What kind of professions do these people tend to take up? Well, some of them sound high and mighty. The first ray is the ray of history, as you would expect. It's the ray of generalship. And history is most often associated with generalship. It is the ray of the diplomat representing his nation, his country. And anybody involved in diplomacy is really associated with the first ray of will and power. These are the great leaders of business, like Maxwell, ruthless, very courageous person. He won an MC in the war. Very courageous, nefarious, ruthless, cruel probably, very first ray Maxwell, capable of taking his own life when he couldn't get his will to work. Murdoch, probably, You can't really tell when a person is loaded with money, can you? Because they can buy anything with money. Whether they could do the same sort of, achieve the same sort of results without money is very doubtful indeed. Now you and I all have first ray in us because we are the frontiersmen of the new age. I wonder whether you've ever understood that you and I are here in a difficult life because we have been, our higher selves have decided that we need to do some frontiersman work. And we're the frontiersmen of the new age. And we're always pressing forward and examining new ideas and adopting new behavior and stances and so on. And so the first ray rules the frontiersman, who goes to bed at night with his rifle next to him. I don't know what you would have as your rifle in your own existence, but they are tough guys. Politicians, financiers, ruthless financiers. I suppose you could call Murdoch one of these, financiers. Sometimes they go wrong. Sometimes when they are chancellors of the exchequer, they can go wrong. We didn't live very far from Reggie Maudling, did we? Who remembers Reggie Maudling? No? No one? Chancellor of the Exchequer, out of office because of naughty boy? Well, sometimes they do become that. First ray people always have an affinity for archaeology, for wanting to look at things that have been buried for centuries and unearth them and enjoy the numinous energy that comes from something antique and very old. Draw the history from an object. Only you can answer a lot of these questions yourself. And so in the end, we have what we call ray analysis. And in ray analysis, and we will teach you how to do it, in ray analysis, you put questions to your subject and you elicit answers which tell you what rays their various bodies are on. Here you have 5 bodies: the physical body, the emotional body, the mental body, the personality, and the soul. 5 bodies. They can be on any of 7 rays. That means there are 35 types, 35 human types of behavior which we acknowledge. And this capacity to understand a person through knowing what his rays is very useful in group work. Person comes in, has his rays analyzed, and if he wishes, allows that knowledge to circulate in the group, and the group is able to assist that person, knowing what difficulties he or she will be having, and also will be able to take things to that person to solve, to deal with appropriately. Second ray types who love democracy also are individuals who have libraries. They love books. They've got to have books. And they start to build a library the moment they become esoteric. And they build and spend far too much money on their books and build up their libraries. But they're a comfort to them for the rest of their days. It's the best investment they ever made, because the library creates an atmosphere in which they can sit and they can enjoy the beauty of tuning themselves in to the authors who wrote those books. I'm doing faces at the cameraman because he gave me a signal and I don't know what it was. What is that? Oh, it's tea time already. All right. Coming up that way anyway. They make wonderful explorers, archaeologists, explorers. Our own Scott of the Antarctic is a good example of a first-ray explorer. They make, if you must go down the scale, they make good gang leaders. They say that many kids in the third world will not survive unless they are part of a gang. And once they join the gang and obey the gang leader who is ruthless enough to steal for them, to commit violence on their behalf, they have a chance of surviving. It's an incredible thing, but that's what they're saying today. Guerrilla leaders. Well, of course, a good example of that was the Prime Minister, not the Prime Minister, the President of France, Mitterrand, who was a guerrilla leader in the war, and may be cited as a good example of that. War leaders like Churchill, and especially young Christian Smuts, who was Field Marshal in the British Army and a close advisor and friend of Churchill's. Don't forget also the leaders who are the patriarchs of the world. There are always patriarchs who have first-rate qualities. One of them is Ayatollah Khomeini of Iran. It was a good example of a patriarch who had very strong first-rate propensities, probably mental, first-rate mental body. Don't forget that countries have first-rate qualities. And two countries that have first-rate souls, the first-rate soul is India has a first-rate soul, and so has China. Britain has a second-ray soul on the ray of love wisdom, with its inherent love of and the establishment of democracy and its affinity with Athens. You see, if you want to, we can put in the rays. Shall we say this is the ray of Great Britain? The rays of Great Britain. A second ray soul on the ray of love wisdom is the deep, esoteric, veiled, hidden part of Britain, who was able, just like many disciples today, to sacrifice an empire, to give up the world, as is required in spiritual unfoldment, to have been involved in the world to a tremendous extent, and yet be able to give it up and search for something else. Britain doesn't know what it is that she's looking for, but it is there, and she is turning inwards and trying to discover what that something is, which is her higher nature. Second-ray soul of Britain, personality on the first ray of will and power. We've had enough discussion here tonight on that. She had, for many years, a fifth-ray mental, certainly since the Industrial Revolution, on the ray of concrete knowledge and analytical science. She has a fourth-ray personality today, and she has a seventh-ray physical. Look at that physical body. And that is ceremonial. Ceremonial, unequaled in the world, and at a physical level. And if you could, I'm sure you did see it. I have never personally in my quite long life seen such ceremonial, so beautifully put together as I saw on D-Day, or the celebrations for D-Day, I should say. Last year, was it? The celebrations for D-Day. Magnificent, magnificent. And any of you who are going to do a course in esoteric psychology, if that video comes out, you should get hold of it. It's the perfect example of a nation with a seventh-ray physical body using ceremonial to express itself. And even the old, I think we better call that a day, Marcus, for break. I thought that at this stage I would take one of those bodies, one of those 5 bodies, and deal with it and show you how it is possible to ascertain the nature of that body in terms of the rays. And tonight we're going to look at the first ray soul, the first ray soul. There are at this time 10% of mankind who have first ray souls. Most of us have second ray souls on the ray of love wisdom. But a first ray soul will present itself again and again, and it is good to be able to differentiate the first ray soul from all the others. It's quite clearly indicated. When you start to question a first ray soul, you become very quickly aware that there is an uneasiness about them. No matter how poised they are with their personalities, how refined they present, and often they do present in a very refined way, you quickly get the impression that there is some deep uneasiness. And when you press them, you can put a question like this to them. Do you sometimes feel that you are alien on the planet? It's a pity that the word alien has been corrupted by a series of films which have polluted it in the minds of people. But by alien I mean that you have not originated here, that you may be from some other region, and that no matter how hard you try, you still have some sort of affinity from this other origin that you come from. And the answer will frequently be, in the case of a first ray soul, yes, I do feel alien on the planet. Another extraordinary thing about them is that they feel that they have something very unique to offer mankind. Something very unique. Pause. Excuse me, I've got a frog. Actually, it's a bit of coconut off that biscuit somebody gave me. Yes, the first ray soul always feels that they have something very unique to give the planet. It may be something to do with teaching, something to do with an exploration or a piece of research. It may have something to do with healing, but it is unique, and they feel that it is part of their life's work to contribute this unique feature to the planetary well-being. Another extraordinary factor about them is that they feel that they have a duty to perform on the earth, and that this duty is somehow related to their Father in heaven, to the Father in heaven. And so they would feel, I must be about my Father's business. And you can question them carefully about that. And a first ray soul will generally pick up on that immediately and say, yes, that's just me. I feel I have something to do and I must get on with that job, whatever it is. And I know my Father in heaven is behind it. They have a natural love and at a deep level for things like architecture, archaeology, in other words, civilizations above the ground and civilizations below the ground. They have an affinity for all the first-ray factors, including the study of heredity, including the study of ancient history in particular, genetics, studies of that nature, they always tend to stand aloof in certain matters. For them, joining a group and being part of the group and taking up the social life of the group is something that they tend to shy away from. Not because they consider themselves superior, but they feel that they would not make a go of it, joining in with everyone. They have this element of isolation. When it comes to down to brass tacks, and you want to know what it is that they are going to do for humanity, and you question them, for instance, about teaching. How do they want to teach? You find that there are two kinds of teachers. Confucius said that 1 in every 3 human beings were natural teachers. But when you look at teaching itself, you find there are two kinds. The one kind teaches a class and goes along with the class and suffers with the class and wants them all to move on together, and will wait behind and give extra instruction for somebody lagging. And they love that way of teaching, but not the first-ray soul. The first-ray soul would like to show the teacher what he should be teaching, would like to teach the teacher to teach, would like to formulate the syllabus for what is presented in the school, and would like to not oversee it so much, but to see that that syllabus was put into effect, rather than being part of the class that you are actually teaching, which is second-ray quality. The first-ray soul likes to use devices, whereas the second-ray soul is a real Shakespearean material type, loves humanity, loves to sit on the sidewalks of life and see humanity walking by, fascinated by every face and figure that passes them. That's second-ray love wisdom. But the first-ray soul is much more distant and will always use devices and techniques and processes in order to get a sort of disciplinary effect across, which is not characteristic of the second ray. They like to intervene and say, no, this is the way to do it. This is the way that it should be done. And that can be quite disturbing when you're giving your best and you're working for nothing in a group, as we all do. Have to work for nothing, and you're working at your hardest and your best, and then comes along this first-ray guy who tells you how you should be doing it. And it can be a little bit upsetting. The first-ray soul is greatly concerned with law, greatly concerned with law. They will always side with those individuals who accept the spirit of the law rather than the letter of the law. Our society has a police force and a system of justice, but that system of justice is so anxious to implement the letter of the law, what the law actually says and passes in Parliament. Whereas the spiritual person should, all of us, be concerned more with the spirit of the law. The child playing on the grass where there is a keep off the grass sign is a person who is just obeying his natural instincts as a child and can't be breaking the law, even though the law says keep off the grass. You want to think about these matters. one of the first things that come to you when you begin to tread the path seriously is, how do I deal with the law? How do I deal with the law of the land? Which law do I give my sovereignty to? Who do I hand over my willingness to? And it makes you search very deeply indeed. Well, when you have that sort of inclination and it is profound, you can suspect a first-ray soul. Of course, they don't like criticism, either at the personality level or even at the spiritual level, and it tends to alienate them more than ever. They're strange people. I had a friend in South Africa who was a first-ray soul, and he was remote. He was remote. And even his peers used to laugh at him. The day he got married, I was told, the day that he got married, that evening there was a theosophy class study, and he turned up at the class in the evening, to the amazement of those present in the class. And just as I was thinking he was an oddball, one day I took the train into Cape Town, and lo and behold, in the compartment was this guy sitting there, and he had brought a book with him to read, and I found that I too always carried a book round with me. It's one of the first things that happen when you begin to tread the path seriously. You can't bear to waste time. You can't bear to sit on a train or anywhere without having a book, perhaps the Bhagavad Gita, perhaps it is the current esoteric work that you're reading. And you have to do that in order to get through the immense presentation of literature that is offered under the heading of ancient wisdom. Well, those are the characteristics of the first-ray soul. And when you are sure of the first-ray soul, you know certain things about that individual, which are quite complementary, opposite to, if you like, from the second-ray soul. The first-ray personality I have described more or less here this evening. They can range from the most emphatic and diabolical personalities through to some of the most just and honest and truthful individuals you could ever meet. And it is up to you to have to recognize them. Sometimes you do get weak first-ray types. And when they are weak, you find that the reason for their weakness is that there is a cluster of first rays in this ray complement. That's what we call a ray complement. And when you get a first-ray personality with a first-ray mind and a first-ray physical, there is an inherent weakness of these first rays in that personality, and it is one that you have to be very suspect of. The inclination, of course, is for there to be two kinds of rays, basically. Notice the 7 there that we have very clearly placed up there. Well, the odd numbers of the rays, that is the 1st, the 3rd, the 5th, and the 7th, are all will rays. There are two kinds of rays, will rays and love rays. And you can ascertain this very quickly amongst your friends. You can think of your friends, and automatically you will say to yourself, oh, he's a love ray. And you can tell straight away he's a love ray. He is not somebody who jumps to conclusions quickly and will administer the law with a boot or something like that. the love rays. They have that natural, lovely quality about them. And so the second, the fourth, and the sixth, those are the even numbers of the rays. The second, the fourth, and the sixth, these are love rays. Gentle people, moderate, usually dedicated to non-aggression, do not, under any circumstances, want to settle a problem with a neighbor by aggressive means. And you can see the rays therefore entwining each other, the love stream entwining with the will stream. And we say that in a ray complement, it is necessary for there to be a balance between these two. If there's only one love ray in the whole complement of 5, that person needs to learn the lesson of love. They're short of love rays. And when you give advice to that person, that would be one of the bits of advice you'd need to give them, that they must open up 1 or 2 of their will rays to allow some love into their lives. And so it is a very beautiful method of assessing a person's spiritual standing and as to what advice to give them. I think we should take a question time now, if that's all right with Ian. Is that all right, Ian? Who would like to ask questions of me? Yes, Jessica.
When we talked about the mind, are we referring to the brain or the mental body?
When we talk about the what?
The mind.
The mind.
Yeah.
The question is, how do we distinguish between the mind and the physical brain? Well, the answer is, of course, that the physical brain is a device, is a structure, an anatomical structure, in fact a computer that has progressively been programmed through living the many years on earth. But the mental part of our nature is associated with the mental body. And the mental body is a body that is in the process of being put together. We are very immature, generally. As human beings, we are generally very immature mentally. Mentally in the sense that we have not yet put our mental bodies together. They are in the process of evolving. We have a higher mental nature called manas, and this mental nature is spiritual. It is not yet able to express itself adequately in our lower mental nature, which is not integrated yet. And so many of us are denied manas. The mental structure itself is something that has defied all investigation by our scientists. I watched a series of tapes the other night by some of our advanced scientists who held a meeting about 6 months ago talking about beyond the brain. And they were floundering still, as they were 20 years ago, 30 years ago, with hardly any advance whatever in coming to understand the nature of the human mind. The human mind is a product of the mental body, and it is sometimes able to express itself adequately through the brain, but not always. Our problem is that not only is the mind incomplete, but it has, in its incompleteness, been able to wrest from us hegemony over us, sovereignty over us. We send our kids to school, to university. They are processed by education. When they come out, they are taught to compete in the world, and certain structures are programmed into the mind so that the mind is unable to do anything but take a specific path of expression. And one of the things that it does is to take control of our personalities. In other words, the highest product of the mental body begins to take the place of the personality. And when the mind dominates the personality, then things like meditation become very difficult indeed. Not only meditation, but the ability to study effectively esoteric teachings. One of the ways in which we gain esoteric knowledge very quickly and very easily is through, for instance, the method of drawing parallels to, or if you like, observing correspondences between. Did we bring that stack of handouts?
Yeah.
Oh, thank you very much. Where is it? What, can you bring them up, please? For instance, oh, all right. Stop him if he comes up. I'm going to hand these out. Would you side? We have the soul, and I've just given you that. See that? If you read it, feels alien on the planet, something unique to give to the planet, feels no need of spiritual advice, teaches to teach, needs to be about Father's business. So that is a very quick summary of a first-ray soul. Then you come to the astral body of the first ray, and it tells you the strong characteristics of an emotional body ruled by the ray of will and power. And so on, the mental body, the personality as a whole, and the physical body right on the end there. So if you had, and later on you'll get the appropriate literature for it, if you had all the rays, that's ray 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, then you have all the qualities of the different bodies. And when we do a ray analysis, I don't use this, but when you learn to do a ray analysis, you can have this as a prompt sheet, or when the ray analysis is being done in front of you, and you say, well, now what's he trying to find out? And I will drop cues to you and say, I'm probing him. I want to know what kind of television program he listens to. If it's documentary, then it's obviously something like the first ray or the third ray, where there is an acquisition of many kinds of information. If it is a romantic thing, then it's probably the sixth ray of devotion and idealism, and so on. So this is a kind of prompt sheet every time you investigate the first ray. And if I said to you, right, we're going to get up here all those who have got a fifth ray mind, they would come out here, and you would have an opportunity, you have turns at it of course, of inquiring, asking them questions to prove that they have a first ray mind. It really is quite a lovely system. So you're going to take these home with you and put them in your folders. It's Atmos. They're going to record an Atmos of a silent room. Say when?
3, 2, 1, silent.